England, what's going on with them? They've fallen back off.
Yeah, well, let's just understand Ireland. CJ Stander came out, announced his retirement. They had a lot to play for. They've had an up and down tournament, and they just came out firing. They had a couple of special moves, an overthrow back into Earls, and Earls had a great little bit of footwork on Johnny May, and it was just everything was running hot for Ireland on the day. They got out to a good lead, and at 32-18 it finished, but most of England's points came after a red card to Bundy Archie, so it's a hard one. I think Eddie's come out and said, we're making a few changes, we're changing our team, so you've got to bear with us. There's making some adjustments, but after such a, I suppose, fighting performance against the French, it was a surprise, I suppose, to see a performance like that, because you'd say the French were performing a lot more, I suppose, at a higher quality than Ireland, but I just felt like the emotion of CJ Stander's retirement and wanting to send him off, and maybe St Paddy's Day during the week, and what that means, and just, you know, the Irish get up for the big occasion and sending people off, and they certainly were up for this game, and they got the job done.
I've read Clive Woodward talking about Eddie Jones and asking whether it's time to call it on Eddie Jones. Now, when you look at Eddie Jones's coaching history, he burns hot for a very short period of time. He's like Jose Mourinho in the Premier League. You bring him in, he turns it all around, and then he disappears. You know, has the best time with Eddie Jones gone now?
I don't know. He got them to a World Cup final.
Yeah.
I don't think you can take it off for Six Nations.
I think as well, if he's talking around like resetting and changing things, you know, you've got to give him time to be able to do that. I think you are right though. He is very similar to that around Jose Mourinho, around coming in really hot, getting a really good standard from the get-go, and then probably just dwindling off a little bit. But I think, you know, if you're resetting a team and there's altering things, there's definitely time for you. You've got to be able to be patient around that. And I know as probably England fans, and they're not patient, you know, because they've probably had a bit of success with Eddie, but there's obviously altering in their game that they're changing. And bigger picture, yes, they'd love to win the Six Nations, but they've got a World Cup in 2023. So do you hold off and you just, you know, you don't change things, or you just keep the status quo, then hoping that you're going to win a World Cup? Or do you go in early and be able to make altercations with your team or the way they're playing, and then come 2023, it's different. So it's just whether the England Rugby Union want to be patient enough with that. But I think if they're altering and changing things, proven how he is, I think you keep it as status quo and give him a chance to go to that World Cup.
I suppose what we've learned in New Zealand is if you do take a couple of losses, you know, especially around World Cup time, the coaches get better for it. And maybe Eddie's been through the situation enough that he knows now the secret to getting through the other side.
I think if he wasn't coming out and saying, look, I'm making shifts for the future, then, you know, you'd be like, okay, well, you'd be more concerned if he wasn't saying that, is all I'm trying to say. Do you know, like if he was just saying, oh no, nothing's wrong here, nothing to see here, then you'd be like, oh, maybe it's time to move him on. But he's saying, look, I'm trying to make change and shifts, so just bear with me. If you know what I mean? Does that make sense? You know, like I just think he's saying the right things to keep him on board.
Yeah, but it's also going to be challenging because the amount of Test football being played, the Six Nations is working, but the international football to be played before the next World Cup is going to be far more minimal than it would have been before. You're not going to be playing 10 to 14 Test matches a year in the most part, are you?
No. There is a lot of calls, though, for him to bring a few younger players in. I think there's a bit of chat over there for Marcus Smith and Simmons and that to get in the squad. So maybe the fans over there are looking for a bit of fresh blood and looking for him to upskill a little bit for 2023, because they are probably seeing the French going for all this youth and seeing a bit of flair. So maybe he needs to look at getting a bit of balance.
Wales. Very close.
PPK.
Oh, mate, 70 minutes. They dominated it. They dominated it for 70 minutes. They're playing a great brand of footy. Like, really like their forwards' skill set shift. Like, Navidi, really like him at 6. He's a short 6, but he makes some really good carries. You know, gets through the other side, uses good footwork. Justin Tipuric set up a try with putting on his boot, put a little grubber through, and they ended up scoring a try that went to the TMO. Was it held up? Was it not? Doesn't really matter. It was a try on the field, so went back down to on-field score. But the loose forward trio worked really well. Tight five worked really well, and they played a tough style. And their two wingers, Adams and Reece Sambit, just made gain line after gain line, and George North in the centre, and they just controlled the fixture. There was a disallowed try at a crucial moment. It would have gone to 32. Reece Sambit did a Matt Duffy and put it in the old league style in the corner, went upstairs and it hit the base of the post first, so ruled out, went back for a penalty, and that took it to 30-20. And at this stage, they'd given the red card for the neck roll eye gouge situation, and it was 30-20, and it was just like, okay, this is Wales.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballed out of control. Penalty after penalty, yellow card, and then went to a scrum. They put it back on the scrum, and they channeled. At first, I was like, they put them. This is going to sound weird, but they put the back on the side that the hooker will hook, and I was like, oh, Struth, why would you put it back there? Because that might affect the channeling. Yeah. But they obviously trained it because he did a really good job with the channeling, which was interesting. Anyway, they scored eventually scored from the scrum, number 8 off the back, and he went over. And then it went into the 82nd minute, and they scored in the corner. Dulon, who was exceptional all game, wasn't he? He did a chip and chase that led to Dupont's try early. He glided through, and it was quite fitting that he scored because I think he's my new favourite player in the French team. I thought Instant was my favourite, but now it was good to see him come back after a long break. He came on earlier. Helibet went off with, I think, a concussion or an injury of some sort. So, but Dulon scored in the corner, 82nd minute, and it was just heartbreaking because, the Grand Slam was there for Wales. They'd earned the right, and they'd just played the game so well. Like they were clinical in all areas, and deserved the win because the French defensively had brought they came to life on attack. But defensively, they just held back all game for some reason and just let Wales dominate. And then, I don't know, the ref came into it, and I thought it was reffed really well, but it just, it was a sad state of affairs. Like, it was a great finish. It was a great finish to the game, but I suppose it was a sad state of. I really wanted Pivac to win because I know him and I wanted Wales to win. I suppose that's why I took that attitude to it, but the French stayed in the fight and they got the result.
If you we talked around the Hurricanes losing that one. Wales did the same thing. They had it all their way. They dominated all the things that Jip is talking around, and then obviously the indiscretions around yellow cards really put them under the pressure. And to France's credit, they still had to win the game. They did it in the 82nd minute, scoring that try, and you could see the emotion of the French, how much it meant to them. Now they've got an opportunity to play Scotland. Is that right? Play Scotland in a catch-up fixture. So it's all to play for, and I feel, because obviously we know Wayne Pivac as well, and it would have been great for him to win that Grand Slam, but it's one that got away from them again. It was very similar to their Hurricanes, and I even talked about the commentators, listened to the commentators, they were like, there was a penalty happen, it's like, that's probably the end of the game right there. And to France's credit, they came back and won, and now it's all to play for, what you want in a competition. You want to always go into the last week, and
Can Scotland spoil the party?
I
don't know, like, the French are fighters, man. Against England, they come back and then they just lose at the death with England, and then you sort of think, they're fighting away, and then they do in England on Wales, and it's like, it's been a great tournament, the Six Nations, hasn't it? In the sense how all these games have gone down to the wire. It was great.
And we talked about it earlier around the French, how dangerous they're going to be in 2023. A result like that, going into it's obviously a long couple of years away, but a win like that and a moment like that, it's just going to galvanise that team even more and give them more confidence going forward. So, they've got opportunity against Scotland, but I think that kind of win can really be a pillar moving forward, especially coming into the World Cup in 2023.
Especially against such an experienced side. Like they had the upper hand of experience.
That forward pack has a lot of caps in it.
And they obviously didn't. I just felt like they'd played the right game to win. I don't want to say they deserved to win because they didn't win, but it just and the cards were fair. Like, it was all the French, got the right result on the day, but it was tough to watch.